Welcome back to the live. I'm doing a live tonight about sex in the Pillow Revolution, which I don't talk about very much. I talk about the Pillow Revolution all the time. I don't talk about sex in the Pillow Revolution very much, although it's a major factor. It's just in modern times I haven't had much occasion to talk about it. So, and it's not like there's some recent news story or something that makes me want to talk about it. I just kind of thought about how I haven't talked about it, and it made me realize, you know what? That's an important thing to talk about. I guess I did make a video not long ago, and then it came up again in a live. Um, Something that sex is one of the best cures for fascism. Well, we have a lot of fascism, and while we can't have sex on YouTube or whatever, we can talk about it. So, talking about it is, you know, at least a good part of it, and we don't usually talk about it. So, I wanted to talk about sex as part of a revolution. When you think about it, there was a last big kind of revolutionary movement in America was like 60 years ago, and there was this big sexual revolution component of it that, um, I mean, in some ways, we've had other types of sexual revolutions since then. I mean, there's definitely been, I don't know, different types of improvements and different types of backsliding, or it's gotten better and gotten worse. I guess you could put it that way. I don't know what it was like that back then, but my impression is that there was this, in addition to all these other revolutionary movements coming together, there was a sexual revolution component of it. So when I first came up with the term pillow revolution, like 30 years ago, um, that was always a component of it, thinking that that a worldwide nonviolent revolution um, would have the sexual element to it as well. And you can see how, especially when you think about um, different customs all over the world, but patriarchy being a problem all over the world, and in different ways. There's different ways for there to be a sexual revolution. Sometimes the revolution could be from people, having less sex, having like a sex boycott or something. Other times the revolution, I think, could be from people having much more sex. And I think that's, important thing to recognize, encourage, and kind of like, um, you have the conversations about and figure in, and we never talk about that. That's one thing. We talk about sex a lot less, I think, in modern society. Or if there's anything remotely sexual mentioned, it's it's usually some type of condemnation and some type of, in order to say something was bad. Otherwise, we're just not talking about it. Um, or let me know if I'm wrong. If you think about ways that the American culture, you know, promotes positive sexuality or anything like that. Um, anyway, so I think just saying that and feeling like nothing's coming to mind for me, um, yeah, really just drawing a blank. It makes me think of other cultures being different than the American culture, and it makes me think that that's one reason why America is so susceptible to fascism, or why the fascism has gotten so bad in America, and why I do think sex is a good cure for fascism. Even talking about sex, good cure for fascism. So that's why I wanted to have that be the highlight of or the theme of my live tonight. So, um, looking forward to having a conversation, but I'll just keep rambling about stuff too, because I'm also excited about the what I think has to be a military coup next Tuesday. So we're like 3 days away from hopefully a military coup where they finally overthrow the Trump regime. And that's going to be a really good way to end fascism. But for us personally, we can support that. We can have parties and stuff. We can have parades and celebrations, personally, like this. Hooray, I'm excited about it. I expect to have that type of celebration at least. But yeah, we can have parties and other forms of um, celebrating, hopefully, the end of Trumpism, like in 3 days. Like, as it's already Sunday, so yeah, basically 2 or 3 days. But anyway, I'm really excited about that. I've been really looking forward to that. But the other thing that we need to do is root out these ideas. And one way to root out the ideas is to be obviously having a lot more fun than the people who hold these ideas. And one way to do that is like the parties that I mentioned before. Um, Another way to do that is by, being expressive of sexuality and being able to enjoy and be proud of sexuality and having sex and stuff. So, um, and having just uh, more of all types of interconnection with people. But again, this live is going to be specifically about sex and how sex is one of the best cures for fascism. So, which is one reason why the fascists are so against sex, sexuality, and especially, well, I mean, you could say a variety of sexuality because they are against that. Like that's one of the things they're against. But they're against sexuality like entirely. Like they're against sex. Like they have that's part of their problem. It goes to the core of their problem, I think. And so I think it would be very good to be promoting sex in ways that specifically uh, oppose fascism, and in that context, to talk about how sex and sexuality opposes fascism. Uh, I think it's an important conversation to have, an important way for people to, because like, how does it work? Like, well, let's discuss it. It works by having people overcome the inhibitions and issues that fascism gives people over their sex and sexuality. Like, here's one way it works. I keep seeing the um, videos about, the Charlie Kirk Klan rally, crashed grinder or whatever, like any large collection of these um, fascists seems to do. And then they're all like really homophobic. So, golly. And they had one of them recently. I guess it was the I've Had It podcast. Sorry, I've got this cat fur all over me. Was profiling one of the Benny somebody who was giving a real Nazi speech at the Charlie Kirk Klan rally. Just a real, like, Civil War kind of speech. And a real anti-American, like, traitorous kind of speech. And just how, he's gay, but, homophobic. And so um, they're calling him out for that. And I think, well, all these people aren't they? Aren't all MAGA people who are homophobic, aren't they secretly gay? And so it wouldn't really help them just to be gay and enjoy being gay and not have this like crazy self-hatred and all this like pent up uh, inaccessible energy or stuff that comes out in fascism, that comes out in worshiping Donald Trump and stuff. Sorry, this cat fur is all over me. So anyway, I feel like that, like just having people's actual sexuality not be impinged and oppressed by all these like social um, stifling social norms, I guess you want to call them, or just social bullshit that comes from all sorts of sources. But when you trace those sources back, or when you see how they're like interconnected, they're all kind of the same. They're all part of the same network. These conservative, um, prudish, and hypocritical, and self-hating, closeted, homophobic, transphobic, just all the things. It all goes back to them, either through Christianity or through conservatism or through whatever it is, but it's all kind of the same crap. And we should be able to overthrow them by overthrowing that, you know, uh, common mentality, or that accepted reality that, sex is shameful, or people, there's some type of like business people have thinking about what other people do, and just all the stuff that they do. Like, the more you step away from it or can see through it, the more ridiculous it is, or the more you escape being subject to it, the more ridiculous it is. But we're still subject to it. Like, as a society, it's still um, pretty pervasive, and I think it's part of how they got the fascism so bad. Again, I think one of the cures for it is, all sorts of community and like physical interaction and connection and stuff also involves sexuality, leads to people having sex, stuff like that. Now, talking about it on the phone, not so much, but at least it's, whoa, at least it's getting to the topic. At least it's addressing the topic and bringing up sex and sexuality opposed, and how it opposes fascism, how all sex and sexuality opposes fascism. At least bringing up the topic to, whoa, sorry, this cat has got a lot of fur. Um, to oppose fascism that way, like in the intellectual realm. So that's what I was looking forward to doing. Wasn't expecting. Uh, well, I don't know what exactly I was expecting. I guess I'll wait and find out. Because I guess this is about right. I guess this is about right for YouTube. Um, I'm getting better audience members. I'm getting more good audience members in my lives lately, which I certainly appreciate. But it usually takes a while before they show up. So sometimes that can be frustrating or irksome or something. But anyway, um, like I was saying before, I didn't really have a specific uh, a specific. Well, I guess I don't know. There's nothing really in the news about that relates to sex and sexuality. There's not really something that happened today that made me think about it. Just in general, the fact that we don't think about it, that we don't talk about it, that it's not a subject of our conversation or discourse in the American culture, except for like to demonize things, except for like to try to fearmonger stuff and all sorts of junk like that, which is bad. Makes me think, well, that's all the more reason why we should talk about it in positive light, talk about the good and benefit of sex, and the reason why sexuality itself is just against fascism, like nature is against fascism, and vice versa. Fascism is against sexuality and against nature, which is ironic to say because like Trump is supposed to be such like a rapist and stuff, which he is, but I mean that's not like sex. That's not like good sex. That's like what's wrong with. That's like how these people who are so anti-sex end up doing something related to it, because it's all that's attacking people and stuff and exploiting people and all this stuff that's like completely getting it wrong. So if all that stuff's getting it wrong, then like sex and sexuality that's getting it right is opposed to and can help prevent and bring people away from all that stuff. So, sorry, I feel like while I'm waiting for people to show up in the live, I'm just gonna help get some of this fur off of this cat. It's really an excessive amount. See. Anyway, and I guess that's what I was gonna say earlier. Is I don't really expect YouTube is gonna show this live to. I mean, YouTube shows my live to usually a lot more people than this, but considering the topic, probably not. So anyway, but then with the phrase "pillow revolution" decades ago, last century, and The basic idea is a non-violent revolution, like pillow revolution, like a pillow fight that's like soft and whatever, and it's not even really a fight. It's like you're playing around. And one of the main things I thought about is how you can do it from bed, like you can do it with sex. Like sex is a part of this revolution, just like sex would be a part of any good revolution. But that's really emphasizing the love side of things, the love end of the spectrum instead of the hate and fear and violence side of the thing, side of the human experience spectrum. And whoa, and being against war, stopping fascism and oppression and stuff by encouraging and increasing people's enjoyment of sex. And I also think people could just all use more self-esteem. I think one way to approach this or to talk about this topic is to say everybody could use more self-esteem and more sex. I think if you were to talk about all the classifications or groupings of people that could benefit from more sex, you could just list people for all day and night. And if you're going to talk about the classifications and groups of people who really couldn't benefit from more sex, like, the list would be pretty short. And self-esteem, I think, is also something that like everybody could benefit from more actual self-esteem. I don't see how self-esteem could be wrong or bad, for anybody. I think something we could all benefit from. And so that also suggests to me that both of these things, like culturally, socially, sex, and sexuality, is in too short supply. I mean, yeah, there's um, still a lot, but there's not as much as there should be for all the people that we have. And same goes for self-esteem. Self-esteem is rare. It's like a rare commodity, but there's no reason it should be. It's just like we've been, at least in this American culture, we've been sold a lot of ideas about like ego and stuff. There are a lot of people who manage to be egoists or egotists, but I don't. I would submit that those people don't have that much self-esteem. They're just they have the ego thing, and it's not the same. And that it's maybe like successful people or something like that have self-esteem, but I'm not even sure. They probably do. They probably do, but there's not as many of them. I don't think as we pretend. I think most people are more of in the struggling category by far. So I'm finding a real mine of hair on this cat that hasn't hasn't been fluffed out lately. But her hair is very like matted, kind of almost in places from where it gets all clumped up. Anyway, I guess a lot of like my usual audience is trolls and stuff that would have nothing to say in a conversation about sex and sexuality, where they were coming in waiting for me to say something about the military coup that I think is going to happen on Tuesday, or that really should be happening on Tuesday. And then they moved along when that wasn't the topic. Oh my gosh. But I also think when you think about how much these bad guys are all responsible for all these like sex crimes, there's a lot to that. Like that's a central part of their whole evil network. There's a reason why the Epstein files are so preciously guarded, and they're being so secretive about it because it's the core of their network, or it shows exactly who it is, stuff like that. And it's probably they were probably intentionally targeted to some degree, especially if you consider Epstein's involvement in government stuff. So they've got this like bad side of sex, like this dark side of sex and sexuality that I mean, it's not like they have a full monopoly on it, like they're involved in everything everybody does bad sexually. You could see that there's like a relationship that's connected, but they're not like responsible for it. They're not doing it personally. But if they are the ones doing this core network of stuff, and of course they're always blaming Biden or whatever, they're always blaming the other side for doing it. But if they are actually the core of it and, the worst of it, and it's this whole network, it seems like it is kind of collapsing on different sides right now. Like it's getting exposed through Trump not exposing the Epstein files, but, that just leaves it up to our imagination, which, you know, could be worse. And it's crazy to think that it's worse than we can possibly imagine, like literally worse than we can possibly imagine. So then you can imagine the very worst things you can possibly imagine, and then it's worse. So there's Trump covering it up from that side. There's this Charlie Kirk stuff, which relates back to Trump, because apparently Charlie Kirk's wife was, from a Trump beauty pageant. And then that relates to Israel as well. And it's just like, and Putin keeps kidnapping kids, and Trump keeps kidnapping kids, and Netanyahu keeps kidnapping kids. And it's like that might be all of the major network of it right there, and it's collapsing from all those different sides, or it will be soon collapsing from all those different sides. And again, this is all like, I don't even want to call it sex. You want to call it like the evil, like, replacement of sex, which is what these fascists are all about. Ending like regular sex and sexuality, regular, meaning like human, like natural sex and sexuality, and replacing it partly through this whole system that takes place because, so many of them have been like caught in this deviant stuff, in this web of, deviant, depraved stuff, the Epstein files, that that's their thing. That's their whole it's their whole brand. So when there's millions of them or whatever, they might not all be involved in that, but their leaders apparently are. Like, everybody at the top apparently is in this way. So it's not, it's not a secret to these people at the top. Like, they know what they're involved in. But all the, the rabble, all their supporters don't yet, although they're starting to. Like, more and more of them are starting to. But anyway, that's the bad side of it. And I feel like the good side of it, when you think about like sexuality and sex on the left, like, yeah, we can feel better about it and be more proud of it and stuff like that. But it's not like something we're like promoting in a good way, like culturally. I mean, yeah, individually people do, and that's good. I want to encourage more of that. But it's not like that's something that the party says it stands for. I mean, it stands for people's rights, like trans rights and gay rights and stuff. But that's just one part of it. It's not like that's not that's not supporting sexuality as a thing that's against fascism. And I think we need that. We need the energy that comes from sex and sexuality itself directed against fascism in the same way we did in the 60s. And, this, uh, the love generation and the culmination of all these different social movements coming together into one giant social movement. And kind of the sexual revolution being some type of, glue or something that, helped all these things come together in, you know, really powerful ways. I think, well, because that was the case, they've worked extra hard on removing that glue or keeping that from being, one of the factors this time around. And they've succeeded to a great degree. But if this fascism is so against sex and sexuality, then we should be able to use sex and sexuality against the fascism. Let me know what you think now that you've arrived. It's really not surprising, but it's really net and YouTube. It's really YouTube of YouTube to reduce the audience of my live because of the topic this time. It's understandable. It's what they do. Um, it kind of makes me wonder about, like, even though you say that the live is not for kids and you imagine that they have like ways of keeping kids out of your life, it's like, well, are all the trolls that are always in my life actually still kids who can comment? You know, a lot of these MAGA types, because that's usually who I get in my life, these MAGA Trump Putin trolls. A lot of these MAGA types are kids, but then, they're not kids for that long, and then they're shooting Charlie Kirk or shooting the ice plays. They're or shooting up the high school up the street the other day. The same day they shot Charlie Kirk. And they're making them this way. Like, it's just the same Trump Putin network. It's a terrorist network. And it's making the kids this way. And the kids, don't know better. That's why they're the ones who keep doing this bullshit. Um, that's the reason why there's so many school shootings, but it's also the reason why these, like, more high profile political type of shootings lately have also been by these kids who are, just grown up or just whatever, but they've been immersed in this right wing terrorist incel network for 5, 10, 15 years. And that's the result of it. That's the plan. That's the recipe. So anyway, um, sex would be much better. Sex and sexuality would be much better thing for these young people to be exploring when they become adults than violence and graper, incel manosphere terrorism that's going to end up making them into terrorists. So yeah, it's like good stuff, like natural stuff against these bad guys and their bad stuff. And we don't talk about sex or sexuality enough. We talk about sexuality kind of like as a social wedge issue or some shit. We talk about it for triggering purposes or something. But we don't just like talk about it. Like we don't talk about it much in our society like that. But that's how they breed the fascism. We're not breeding ourselves, and we're not breeding healthy sexuality conversations. Then we're breeding fascism in place of it. That's the way they want it. So I say let's not let them have it. Let's not let the baby have its bottle this time. Like let's take that bottle away. Let's say no. You guys don't get to make everything like it's not just asexual. It's like anti-sexual. It's anti-natural. Like everything about fascism is. So for what we can do to propose it is be um, sexual, be like positive about sex, be open about talking about it, which is why usually I have some type of topic. Lately I've been talking about the coup that I expect to happen on Tuesday. Sorry, I got all this cat fur all over me. Um, and that's, had a lot of people talking, but very rarely do I get, intelligent people to understand what even the conversation's really about. This time I wasn't expecting more people because, talking about sex on YouTube, I'm sure that's, pretty forbidden or whatever. I'm not like talking about sex that much. I'm talking about it as like a general topic. Like, but still, of course they're not going to funnel people into such a life. And it is, part of the reason why they're not going to is because it is one of the more powerful, potent forces, or it's the most powerful, potent force, sex and love, and just connection and stuff. The most powerful, potent force in the universe. And, what are they going to do against that? Nothing. People do all sorts of stuff for love. But even like sex and sexuality, it's like a very powerful force. So much energy, so much motivation, so much potential there. And we don't really even talk about it. Partly to stifle that potential, partly to, um, you know, sabotage those motivations or to, I can't think of the word I was trying to think of. Anyway, um, and, as long as they keep us in their, sphere of what the world is or what we can talk about, it keeps getting worse. Again, I think there might be in for a big surprise next Tuesday. There might be a great military coup. Hooray. But we can do our part, and we can do our part from bed. We can do our part by relaxing, by not participating in certain things. Like, that's great. Boycotts and everything are great. Targeting these different companies and showing our power, all that stuff's great. But if we were talking as much about, for instance, if we were talking as much about the military coup coming up on Tuesday as we were talking about canceling Jimmy Kimmel, they'd be scared to have the meeting. And all we have to do is talk about it. We have to talk about it like, well, hold on. If you ask the generals to sign a pledge, and I know this is going to be about sex, but I still have to finish this thought. If you ask the generals to sign a pledge to Trump instead of the country, and most of them would not do that or would know not to do that, then what is their option other than to coup at that time? Why let the person who's asking them to do the illegal, traitorous, un-American thing be the boss? Just be the boss instead. Remove that boss. Like, I don't feel like I need an analogy, but if you had a boss and you were under the boss, but you could remove the boss and be the boss, and you had very good reasons for doing that, wouldn't you just do it? So anyway, I feel like if we just talk about this, then if their plan was to make them all sign a pledge, then they have to come up with some other reason for their meeting. Because they can't do that anymore. Because we'll say, well, no, if you try to make everybody sign a pledge, they'll coup. Their duty is to coup. Anyway, that's what I've been talking about for days in my lives. And I'm looking forward to it. And I do think it's important to talk about. But I figured, it's so funny, I figured I would talk about sex instead. Not because I thought I would get a bunch of views. I kind of figured I would get one or two like we currently have. Because Net and YouTube is supremely against sex. Like, they're super scared of it. They're super, not promoting it or not gonna allow it or whatever. They're not down. And why not? Because the same reason they don't allow me to type a lot of my comments on people's videos and stuff. Not because my comments are sexual, because my comments are anti-fascist. Because they're fascist. They don't allow sex, they're fascist. Fascists are against sex. They don't allow my comments, they're fascists. Fascists are against my comments. So I think that if we talk about sex, if we promote sex, if we celebrate sexuality when they're against it, then it's not just that we'll make them mad, it's that we'll win, that we'll connect with that energy that we've been denying or we've been sequestered from. Like, I'm trying to think of what the word is, that we have, blocked off, to large degrees. Not everybody, not all the time, but culturally we do. Culturally, we're when you think about other cultures besides the American culture, and you think about the sexuality or sensuality of other cultures besides American cultures, you know, it's all different and it's all stereotypes. It's all whatever, right? But I don't know what even is maybe from an outside perspective, America is looked at as sexual or sensual or stuff. Maybe compared to some cultures, it kind of is. But we have this really severe anti-sex, just the whole MAGA movement. Um, and I mean, I guess other people like the Taliban or somebody, and Iran or somebody. Maybe there's some other countries that are really hardcore, anti-sex, anti-woman kind of things, like America is right now. I don't know. They're not jumping to mind. My point was to imagine all these other cultures that have sexuality and sensuality as something positively associated with their culture, and America's not high up on that list. You can think of all these other cultures having that in a way that America lacks it. So I think we should rediscover that. Or when you think about the expression, the cultural the overall cultural expression in America of sexuality. We had that in the '60s. We had the flower power love hippie movement and all the different movements of the 60s that involved you know women's rights, civil rights, peace, um, gay rights, sexual revolution, all this stuff coming together. And I think that sex is an important power or engine in that, like a tractor, whatever you want to call it. It's an important core of all that, the heart of all that. And then they in some ways they cut the heart out. Like you still have all these movements. All these movements aren't really together. We have reasons for every one of the same movements we had back in the 60s. We have wars we need to oppose. We have all this different stuff, but we haven't come together. And I guess maybe something we need to add to it is it not, there's like a bigger thing than like just feminism and pacifism. Those are big, and environmentalism. Those are big. Those are huge and big. But I think there's something about the goddess beyond that. And I think that's another thing that even if people weren't thinking, and that there were people thinking of sex and sexuality and the goddess, and still are. But even if those weren't really the terms people were putting the sexual revolution into, it was more about themselves. It was more about their body, which is important too. Um, our bodies and the goddess. I think the spiritual goddess dimension of that has not nearly come into play as much as it can. I wonder who this one person is who seems to be watching a lot. Hi, I'm Puffin. Nice to meet you. And I think that's where things are going to shift the most. Or I think that's maybe going to be the component that, in the same way that I think it was sex and sexuality that brought together or that helped meld together all these different movements in the 60s, the last time we had a major, countercultural movement in America. Now that we need that again, but we don't have it, I see sex as the thing that's missing there. Um, and while we have sexuality, we don't have this celebration of sex and sexuality within the context of these movements, bringing them together. And we don't have the goddess like we could, like we can. That, maybe in the 60s, just the sexual revolution part of it was enough to connect to or, um, bring in the goddess. And again, like I said a minute ago, and more people were doing that consciously too. More people did have the spiritual component of the goddess involved. But we don't have that now. I mean, we do. We have it available, but we're not activating that. Just like we're not activating, another sexual revolution. Just like we're not activating another spiritual revolution, awakening. But it's necessary. Like now is the time for that. And it is somewhat up to us, It's like if the goddess was going to initiate this stuff all the time, then things would have already been better. Like it's up to us to overcome like this patriarchal strictures keep us from doing it. So that's what I was going to do in this live. I really wasn't expecting that much of an audience, but I was expecting conversation. So fail, major fail, 0 comments, 0 people willing to participate. And like 5 people total came in 40 minutes. Usually if I do a 40-minute live, it gets up to some hundreds of people. So again, I think that proves my overall point that net and YouTube is afraid of sex and sexuality. Fascists are afraid of sex and sexuality. And so therefore, it's not at all possible for me to reach people with such a message. Although when my message has been, the military needs to have a coup next Tuesday, and I'm talking about that for like 30, 40 minutes. I mean, I get a bunch of trolls. It's not a great thing that more people are in here, but it is more people. It's more engagement. It's, gets up to a few hundred, few thousand people lately. And I might get 1 or 2 good people. I get 1 or 2 good people that have something to say. It's actually, could be a conversation. And then by that time, there's so many trolls coming in that it's hard to have the conversation with the one or two good people. So, that's YouTube. I wasn't netting YouTube. That's old netting YouTube. I wasn't expecting that much different. But I am expecting to change it. Like, I'm expecting to change it by this conversation. I'm expecting to change it by realizing that, like all of my content, I post a lot of content. And I can just tell something by the number of views that I get. Very uh, simple things get hundreds of views, and that's great. I'm glad they do. I wouldn't post them if I didn't want them to get views. But the things I feel really passionately about, the things I feel really have really strong opinions that I really hope people will see, they get a handful of views. Like you can count them on your fingers. And so I think if people were to look through my channel and say, hey, what's getting 0 to 4 views? What's getting single digit views on this channel? It would be some pretty radical stuff that has a lot of power and potency to the ideas that are being expressed. And it's hard for me to think of an exception to that. I can think of some things that relate to those same ideas that get some views. But if I'm just directly expressing my ideas about something, they're not going to get that many views. Those videos are almost guaranteed to not get very many views. Which again is why I think if a thoughtful person were to scroll through and see how many views are on these videos, let me watch a few that have under 10 views or under 5 views. Let me be one of the first people to watch this. I think that would do something. I mean, of course, it would do something by increasing a video that only has 2 views by 50%. It would do that. But I think it would do something because these ideas can do something in the world. So the idea of sex defeating fascism can do something in the world. This idea of sex being one of the best cures for fascism can do something in the world. The idea of replacing patriarchy, Christianity, war, and Trumpism, all together, replacing all these things, replacing capitalism, all these things with one thing, like a repurposing of the Christian church, of all Christian churches, and all Christian adjacent churches, whatever you want to call them, replacing them all together. There's one thing that I talk quite a bit about, Church of Judas, that does that. And it's an idea that they don't want getting out there. I'm saying it now to people who might watch this in the future because there's nobody here. But I talk about it quite a bit. I mean, I talk about it when there's lots of people around, but they're not necessarily people that can understand it. So, that's the trick, to be able to talk about this stuff with people that can understand it, and have Net and YouTube allow you to connect with those people. So when you're talking about sex and net and sex and sexuality defeating fascism, and Net and YouTube by and large picks a lot of fascists for your channel who wouldn't have anything to say about that anyway, it's no surprise that you don't get much of a conversation going. But I do think that there's so much power and potential in the topic of sex and sexuality that when people are willing to talk about it, I mean, I think of communication itself as being a form of sex and sexuality. That's how much I think it's core to all of our experience. But they can shut it down. They can disconnect us or remove that core. And, in individuals through kind of their social programming and shame and stuff like this. And through, in the society as a whole. Like if the society is a being, they can remove the heart and soul and desire of that being. And they largely have done that. I'm sorry, the cat's back. I'm trying to get more of the fur off the cat. The cat doesn't need this fur anymore. It's all matted up. And I think there's magic to it. There's like the spiritual dimension of accessing the goddess, whether people even know that's what it is or not. And then even more so when they do. And then there's magic to it. And then it's like, just like there's magic if you go into nature, or if you make or experience art or music or something. Or there's magic if you just have a connection with someone or something. And so sex and sexuality are extreme or extremely potent forms of magic, or ways to experience magic, or ways to relate to magic. So anyway, this would be more successful again if I had someone to talk to, but I'm not surprised. First time I've ever done a live. It's the first time I've ever done a live with this topic of sex and sexuality, and I get the feeling that's the same for YouTube itself. Like, YouTube's never had one before. I don't know, I could be wrong about that. But I do hope that if I am wrong about that, that I'll have some exposure to it in the algorithm, that when I get recommended videos, this might be something that they actually recommend. And I'd be very curious, because when I challenged YouTube to show me some things about the coup coming up, because I've been posting a lot about the upcoming coup on Tuesday, and I challenged YouTube to show me some, and it actually did. Knitting Cult Lady actually had a video that did reference, you know, she didn't say it directly, but she kind of implied, yeah, we might have a coup after all. This situation may result in a coup on Tuesday. So I was pleased to see that. Now, are they going to do that with sex? Like, am I going to have to post 20 videos about sex and sexuality before YouTube will show me whatever YouTube's version of a video about sex and sexuality is? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I could be wrong. It could just be my algorithm because I watch too much stuff about Gaza and politics and getting rid of Trump. Um, or, the evils of Trump, I guess, is mostly what it is. They don't show you a whole lot of constructive stuff about how to get rid of Trump, other than just talking about him is one way to do it. But anyway, so it did show me a video about the upcoming coup on Tuesday, and I was impressed and pleased, both with Knitting Cult Lady and with YouTube itself. But I'm a little bit shocked at how few people they let see this video, I guess because it's titled Sex and the Pillow Revolution. It's just titled Sex and the Pillow Revolution. Like, I guess because it has sex in the title. I mean, again, it's fascism. It's fascist. They're anti-sex. They're afraid of sex. They're against sex. Like, they're threatened by sex. I mean, they're afraid of sex and they're threatened by sex. There's, like, sex is their weakness. Um, and so, yeah, the fact, just like I was kind of getting at before, but I guess I didn't really make the point. The fact that I've got videos with 0 to 5 views, and those might be some of the most, like, potent ideas I have on my channel. But of course, YouTube's going to do it that way and suppress the good stuff. And then YouTube's going to make sure that the good ideas don't get out there by not letting them be seen. The fact that it's not letting this be seen, when, like I was saying before, if I go live for an hour, it's about been an hour. If I go live for an hour lately, I get hundreds to thousands of viewers. And so the fact that it's not being seen makes me want to just only do this from now on. It's kind of boring. Again, because I was hoping for people to talk to about stuff. But it's kind of boring right now. But I'm just going to keep doing it. I feel fairly confident no one else is doing it. Because if they were doing it, and they would also be reduced to 0 or 1 viewers, they would stop doing it. But I'm not that way. I'm the way that's like, well, I'm like Gonzo, and he's going to break into movies. He's like, I'm going to Bombay, India. Like, you don't go to Bombay, India, which actually you maybe do now. You don't go to Bombay, India, you go where we're going, Hollywood. It's like, well, sure, if you want to do it the easy way. So I'm going to be gonzo about it, and I'm going to keep talking about sex and sexuality in my lives, except for I do have to go back to talking about um, the coup, the coup on Tuesday, because we've only got 2 or 3 more days. So maybe it's my fault. Maybe I should alternate. Maybe I'll do the next one about the coup. Yeah, I have to just keep talking about the coup. I mean, honestly, now I feel like I duped myself. Now I'm glad I did this live. This was good. It'll get better when I talk about this in the future and have people to talk to about it. And I guess it does prove my point. We don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. We don't have this conversation. We talk about sex and sexuality in order to demonize someone only in that context in America. In zero positive context or frameworks do we talk about sex and sexuality, like culturally. Yeah, individuals might, and good for them. Friends might, but we don't. Like, YouTube doesn't. There's not another YouTube live about it. I mean, people might mention things, but I don't think they're having conversations about it. And we didn't have a conversation about it either. I was the only one who talked about anything. But anyway, I accept the challenge of talking about the subject of sex and sexuality, especially as it defeats fascism. Now, fascists are afraid of it, so we should talk about it. And if YouTube is afraid of it, and they don't want me to talk about it, or don't want to hear what people might have to say about it, or don't want me to be able to talk to anybody about it, well, I'm just going to defy that desire that they have and fulfill my desire to talk about it and connect with other people who want to talk about it. So I'll be doing that in the future, but in the meantime, I will come back to talk about military coup on Tuesday. If nothing else, to compare, how I get like 5 or 10 views for this and hundreds for that and whatever. And I guess I also need to add the layer of, is it a military coup? Because that's what we need to do if they try to make them sign a loyalty oath. Or is the loyalty oath even the worst of what they're presenting? Is the loyalty oath the worst thing that Pete Hegseth and Trump can do? Because worse than that would just be killing them all. And that would be what Putin would want. So they might take that opportunity to do that. And I don't think anybody's talking about that. So, as much as nobody talks about sex, we can hopefully talk about sex after next Tuesday. But until then, I probably should return to talking about military coup on Tuesday or before, because again, why fall into a trap like that? It seems insanely like a trap when it's all 800 of these generals in one place, which has never happened before, and it's insane. It's insane. So I do need to talk about that some more, and that's where all the audience was, or where YouTube allowed people, at least trolls and stuff, and a few good people, to come into my life. So hopefully I'll get in touch with some of those few good people or new good people again, and less trolls. But we'll see how it goes. And I'm afraid that just from not having sex in the title, it's going to have a lot more views, which means maybe I'll cleverly title the next time I try to do this discussion. But I will be doing it again soon because I have to defy any form of suppression. And I have to be true to my belief in sex and sexuality. Is why I've always thought about the Pillar Revolution, including sex and love as a method of taking over and overthrowing tyrants. But I have to be true to that. I have to be true to my belief in the goddess, my love for the goddess, and how sex and nature and art and music and stuff are some of the things that attach or connect us most to the goddess and make us realize the goddess in our lives and in our society. So again, why we need to have art and music and love and stuff in our society, and we need to be able to have the appropriate discussions of sex, the appropriate context or venues or whatever, which this could very well be. But it wasn't this time because it was just me rambling. Didn't manage to connect to a single other person who was interested in talking about sex or sexuality or sex and sexuality defeating fascism. But we will soon because we need to defeat it. In the meantime, I'll come back in just a little bit talk more about the military coup on Tuesday. So see you in a little bit. Thanks. Welcome to the Pillow Revolution.